Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brodie Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Today is part 1 of the psycho-emotional healing series that I'm really excited to share with you. It's a topic that's really close to my heart. Some of the most profound treatments that I've ever given, witnessed, or experienced have been on the level of the psycho-emotional or even spiritual transformation. I feel it's a true privilege to hold space for this kind of healing, and one that isn't often discussed because it's so personal. It doesn't really lend itself well to the randomized double-blind studies that our culture is so enamored with, although I do love it when studies show how effective acupuncture is for this condition and that. But this really goes to a level that is more mysterious and deeply unique to each individual. So for this episode, as well as the next 2, I'll be highlighting experiences of several patients who are willing to share their experiences of deep emotional healing with you on the show. I hope you'll really dig it. First, a little background where I'm plagiarizing freely from my past blog posts and writings to hopefully put this in a useful context. Chinese medicine is a true body-mind-spirit medicine. Emotional and spiritual health are at its very core because our bodies follow our energy and our energy follows our consciousness. So treating at the level of consciousness will affect everything else. When we change our thoughts, our energy runs differently. So right now, if you think you're being chased by a bear, all kinds of physiological changes are going to happen that wouldn't at all exist if you didn't have that perception. And emotions are simply qi. They're a kind of energy. And the nature of all energy in the universe is that it moves. It flows. This is reflected in our own language. The English word emotion comes from the Latin emovere, which means to set in motion. So emotions need to move in order for us to be healthy. And when we suppress or repress an emotion, or sometimes when we simply just don't take the time to feel it and let it go, emotions can get stuck in the body-mind, where they can give rise to all sorts of problems. On today's show, I talk with a longtime patient who I'll call Marcia, per her request. That's not her real name. And we discuss how acupuncture helped Marcia let go of emotions, and specifically a post-traumatic stress that she developed after a camping trip with her husband that led to an emergency visit to the hospital and emergency quadruple-bypass surgery for him. Obviously, a huge shock. It's a powerful example of how acupuncture can help let go of stuck energy in the form of stuck emotions. We then go on to talk about how Marcia has used Chinese medicine to help her develop greater self-compassion, self-love, and appreciation. In particular, we get into the notion of constitutional type. So, kind of like the Myers-Briggs Personality test, or your astrological sign, or your Enneagram number, or your Ayurvedic Dosha, Chinese medicine likens different aspects of our physiology, psychology, and mental tendencies to the elements of nature: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. If you're curious about what type you are, you can go over to my website, brodiewelch.com/Chinese-element-quiz and find out. And that'll be in the show notes if you're interested. So your constitutional type is like the cards that you're dealt at birth. Whether you're a type A, introverted or extroverted, people-oriented, what organ systems tend to be rock solid for you, and which ones tend to be challenge areas that you need to support. This is all part of what you come in with. And identifying what type you are innately can help you recognize particular superpowers, your gifts. But it's also useful in helping us recognize when we've become a caricature of ourselves, when our greatest strength has become a limiting factor or a greatest weakness. You know the old saying, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail? Well, for jobs like getting nails into boards, yes, the hammer is indeed the best tool. But if we insist on always using the trusty hammer to unclog a pipe or tighten a screw, it becomes easy to feel stuck, frustrated, and stressed. Marcia does a really beautiful job of explaining how understanding herself and her tendencies from a Chinese medicine perspective helps her to let go of when she's acting from habit and stretch freely into the potential of who she truly is. So here's the conversation with Marcia. we have worked together for many years, and I've had the pleasure of working with you on all kinds of interesting issues that have nothing to do with the physical body necessarily. And I'm just wondering if you could share with the kinds of issues that we've worked together on that you feel like acupuncture has helped you with.
Certainly. I've brought to treatment issues of codependency and boundaries and my addiction to perfection and doing things perfectly and doing things on my list and not feeling worthwhile if I don't accomplish those things, and feelings of worthlessness. And I believe that one of the greatest things that I have gotten from my treatments is more of a sense of loving myself and being more patient with myself and taking care of myself.
That's wonderful. It's the kind of thing that I don't know, I'd love for people who just think of acupuncture as helping with physical pain issues. I'd love to help them understand how this works, right? Because a lot of these things you'd think about going to see a counselor or therapist about, but you're bringing them to the acupuncture clinic because we have a framework for dealing with the body, mind, as well as the spirit. And so I'd like for you to describe, help people understand, is it just the needles? Is it the interview process? What happens for things to shift around these issues for you?
Well, I think it's all of it. I think it's the interview process and your ability to kind of hone in with your questions on what it is that's up for me. And I often don't know what that is until we talk.
So I give you an opportunity to check in with yourself and to see kind of what's really going on, what's underneath whatever that initial feeling is.
Exactly. And I might come in and talk about one thing, but then all of a sudden with just one question, it shifts and all of a sudden it's deeper. And it's like, oh, that's what's really going on. I'm really frustrated, or I'm sad, or I'm overwhelmed. And all of a sudden, it becomes clear what it really is that I'm on about that day.
Yeah. So really being able to get to the core of what you're feeling just by having that opportunity to tune in. And so part of that interview process. And once we identify what that theme is, usually as a practitioner, since I'm not a counselor or a therapist, I don't try to be one, but instead I use, for example, the driving and striving of perfectionism. That can be kind of a wood element thing in Chinese medicine if it has to do with achievement and needing to feel like we need to accomplish something in order to feel worthy, or it can be a metal element thing in Chinese medicine if it's about our rigid standards that are inflexible, kind of like the element of metal. So even the same issue, on one day might seem more like one treatment strategy might present itself versus another. So then I'll pick points and meridians, and also depending on whether this is from the past or whether this is more a present day issue of something that's going on in the here and now, I'll pick a different strategy, and then we will move into the treatment, that actual process. So I'm curious if in being on the table, is there any treatments that stand out for you as being particularly powerful, or anything that you remember that's kind of risen to the top of the heap? Because we've been working together for maybe a decade now, and I would understand if it all blurs together.
It does. It really does. And there are times that I do remember. I think the most recent one, and this has been, 6-8 months ago, is after Ron was through his heart surgery and was, pretty much recovered. But
this is your husband?
That's my husband. Yes, my husband. And And I mean, it was a shocking thing to go through, a quadruple bypass with him and be caretaker and caregiver and being in charge of medicines and meals and taking care of the house and the whole everything.
So major shock for you, followed by major responsibilities and obviously concern for your husband's survival and well-being.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And so once we sort of got out of the woods, for want of a better expression, I was started to let go of some of the responsibility. But what I found, I think this one particular day I came in for a session and I was, again, not sure what was bothering me, but once I got on the table and you inserted the needles, I released so many of the feelings that I pushed down over the quite extended period of time. And I just cried and released that energy in such a way that I felt lighter, freer, less codependent, I guess, in a way. And it was great. That was quite an amazing session.
Oh, crying feels so good sometimes. Or it can be a way for pent up energy to leave the body, right? And in a very non-woo-woo way, emotions are chi, and sometimes they get stuck in our physical form. That is one of the most amazing things about the acupuncture process, is that we can catalyze the movement of energy such that it can allow that stuck emotion to move out.
And it moved.
Yeah. So afterwards, you ended up feeling lighter and more free. That's awesome.
It was great.
So, and did that stick around for you? Like, do you still feel that helped put that chapter in the past?
Yes, it did. And there's been additional letting goes that weren't as big as that, but yes. Yes, it did. It helped a lot to put my life back in perspective.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I love that. I think that's a great example of how acupuncture can catalyze emotional release. How about just the Chinese medicine framework, and how has learning about yourself through the lens of Chinese medicine, how has that helped you over the years, or even when we work together, even just in the understanding yourself in these terms of energy or in terms of the 5 elements, how does that, or does that help you?
Oh, definitely. It does. And I admit that sometimes the different terminology kind of, the word, not confuses me, but I get it kind of mixed up. Mm-hmm. But I think I know what kind of type I am. Mm-hmm. And so now when I see myself rushing around and having 6 lists, bunches of sticky notes everywhere, I know, that's my wood type. Mm-hmm. It helps me to accept, that that's who I am.
So having more compassion for yourself?
Yeah. And having more compassion, but also you have taught me how to use that. In other words, the good things about that, but then the parts that trip me up, that cause me to get stuck or feel overwhelmed by, 6 lists and a dozen sticky notes. And then now I can say, whoa, back off and give yourself a break.
Yeah. So in a sense, knowing that you, for example, are a wood type, or that you have a lot of wood energy in your constitution, that you can feel a certain amount of pride in owning that, right? Like that you're someone who makes it happen and gets it done. And at the same time, there are points when that tips into kind of an exaggeration of who you are. And that, when you see the 6 lists and all the sticky notes, then you can say, okay, and see yourself as the out of balance version of what's otherwise a real strength. And so it's being able to see that for what it is and be able to shift your perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's been invaluable in many ways. And I know as soon as I start feeling overwhelmed, that 2 things are happening. That number 1, I've got too much going on. I've said yes too many times. and I need to change my strategy.
Yeah.
And the other is to really take better care of myself and develop the yin part, to nurture the yin part of me that I neglect when I get busy.
What do you mean by the yin?
Well, there's the yang type, where that part of our constitution that is out and doing things, and it's like the sun.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, like honoring your yin means coming back, slowing down, coming back to yourself, getting quiet.
Getting quiet. It's nurturing. It's nurturing myself, as opposed to always nurturing something or somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yes, we're so much alike.
I know.
Maybe that's why we work so well together.
I know it is. I know you get me.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your experiences with other people. A lot of times it's hard for me to explain, I'm so close to it, and it can be hard to explain what the value is, I think, in understanding yourself through the lens of Chinese medicine. I know how valuable it is to me, but I'm in love with it, and so you're someone who's not necessarily an Acu nerd, but who's gotten a lot of value about it over the years. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention or to convey to someone who might be interested in pursuing Chinese medicine for a non-physical issue?
Oh, golly. I think one of the things that I really do appreciate is it is a different lens to look at life through. I wish I could explain better how much better it's been for me as opposed to traditional talk therapy.
You feel like acupuncture or like working with me in the clinic has been more effective than talk therapy?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do, because I feel empowered by the work that we do. I don't feel like, you're saying, well, this is what you have to do, and this is going to make you better, and yada, yada, yada. It's like I make this choice to do these things, and it does make me better. I feel better.
So it's not only the acupuncture, but it's also the self-care assignments that we use as follow-up.
Yes. And I have them in my little notebook here, and I refer to them often.
This is the self-care prescription pad that I give patients.
That's right.
Nice. Well, I'm so honored that you keep them and that you use them and find them helpful. And it's such a gift to me to be able to work with such a conscious and evolved person as yourself on this path, because it's super exciting.
Well, thank you.
Love being able to do it. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today.
No problem. Thank you.
If your curiosity was piqued by this conversation and you would like to discover more about your constitutional type from a Chinese medicine perspective, then my Basics of Chinese Medicine course is just for you. It is starting in October. You can check it out at brodiewelch.com. Thanks so much for listening today. Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodiewelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.